Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Other Scott.
And I'm your co-host, Other Matt.
And we are the Other Brothers?
Podcasters.
I didn't think this one through. This week on the show, it is another one of our Doof Canon episodes. What is this thing, Matt?
Well, once a month, those individuals that donate to us on Patreon at the Council of Doof level get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the canon. Scott and I, and maybe some guests, will meet, talk about the movie, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But as always, we are leaving that final all-important decision up to you folks. So stick around, listen to our arguments, and then find the link in the show notes of this very episode to cast your vote. Matt, what has our esteemed council brought for us today?
This month, the council has put forth the 2009 animated film Coraline.
Oh boy. I'm so excited. We actually have talked about this film before, Matt. I don't know if you remember. One of our very first episodes was like a full Leica conversation where we talked about all the Leica films released up until that point.
That sounds familiar, and I do remember talking about it, but I'm glad we get to talk about it in more detail.
I am as well. It's a big movie that I love quite a bit, so I'm very excited to have this conversation. And then after we do that, we're going to talk about some other spooky movies. We're gonna have a little conversation, a little not top 5, but top X amount of whatever of movies that scared us when we were little kids. Because I think one of the arguments we're going to be making during the course of this conversation is it's okay for a kid's movie to scare children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, let's get right into it, Matt. Let's talk about Coraline.
Coraline Jones always dreamed of finding a better world. A world more exciting than this. But never did she imagine that she'd discover it in her own home.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
An adventurous 11-year-old girl finds another world that is strangely idealized version of her frustrating home, but it has sinister secrets.
This movie was written and directed by Henry Selick, based on the Neil Gaiman novella of the same name. It stars Dakota Fanning as our titular Coraline and Terry Hatcher, who plays Mother and Other Mother and whatever you call the spider thing she turns into at the end of the movie. Henry Selick, by the way, also the director of Nightmare Before Christmas, which I know what you're saying right now, Matt. You're saying, no, that's wrong.
Everyone knows that Nightmare Before Christmas was directed by Tim Burton, Scott.
Yeah. It says on the tin, Tim Burton's A Nightmare Before Christmas, but it is not Tim Burton's A Nightmare Before Christmas. It is Henry Selick's A Nightmare Before Christmas. Disney really kind of screwed him over with that, by the way. The story of that is actually really interesting. I don't know if we have full time to go into it here, but suffice it to say, Tim Burton was not actually that involved in A Nightmare Before Christmas. I think he came up with the concept and like the design of one character. Everything else in that movie is Henry Selick. And I think the only thing you need to look at to know that that's true is this movie, which has such similar stylings and tone. It's really, really wonderful. I mean, like I think a great double feature would be Coraline and A Nightmare Before Christmas for sure.
I wrote an article at one point about how The Nightmare Before Christmas might seemingly be about Tim Burton, but it's actually just as much about Danny Elfman or Selick. So
yeah, totally.
But yes.
It's weird that I always forget that information. Like I always forget that it's not Tim Burton, and it's because it's Disney's fault. It's because they were terrified of that movie bombing. Apparently there was a test screening and children were terrified, and so they got nervous and decided to kind of screw over Henry Selick and pump up Tim Burton's name on the thing. So
yeah,
Selick's a little bitter about that still.
Another thing that's kind of unappreciated is that again, Danny Elfman wrote all the songs and including the lyrics and is the singing voice of Jack Skellington. So
yeah,
clearly it was a massive passion project for Danny Elfman. So
I think you're right. Clearly, we're going to have to do a whole episode on Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes, we are.
But for now, let's talk about Coraline. Matt, what are your overall thoughts on this movie? What do you think of Coraline?
I mean, I've always loved this movie. It's one of my, it came out when we were older. We were not children.
Yeah.
But I loved it from the first time I saw it. It's just such a beautiful fairy tale. It's one of those rare kids movies that has the proper amount of edge and like genuine creepiness. And I think my favorite is just sort of example of the kind of thing that I'm talking about is the three ghost children, and the one of them in particular that just has like a fixed like death scream on her face at all times. But just in general, I love this movie. I showed it to my kids like as soon as I could justify doing so when they were little, and they've always loved it. And we had a great time watching it together last night in preparation for this conversation.
That's wonderful. I also love this movie so much. There's a lot of things I love about stop motion animation in particular that this movie does and succeeds at, and we're going to talk about all that. I think what pushes this movie into greatness is this technical skill that they made it with, combined with a pretty sharp screenplay based on Neil Gaiman's story, which is a relatively short novella in Neil Gaiman's book. Like, I'm pretty sure they expanded it quite a bit to make it into this feature-length film, because I think they invented a whole new character for the movie. Like, I don't think Wybie is in the book. I don't think there's ever any scenes with Other Mother where she looks just like Coraline's mother. I think that is all expanded stuff that they added to kind of turn it into a longer story. But I think it's very clever the ways in which it does it. And yeah, I mean, there's so much talent here. There's so much art. There's so much feeling in this movie that you just can't help but just be swept up into it. Like, it's gorgeous. It's creepy. It's fascinating. And I think it tells a good story. I think, I every time I think of Neil Gaiman, I think of The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which is probably because that's the most recent Neil Gaiman book I've read for our book club a few months ago. And that book enchanted me. And that's Neil Gaiman's real skill when he writes these kind of fairy tale-esque stories where they just enchant you. And I think that's what this movie does to me as well. Yeah.
He's really good at finding that spirit of the fairy, which I'm specifically referencing that word the way Tolkien uses the word, where he's referring to this, ancient tradition of storytelling where there's the otherworldly, the uncanny, the disturbing other that is kind of lurking just outside the firelight, and that it's closer to like prehistoric horror stories than it is really what we think of as like, a fairy tale. A fairy tale is for children. It's like, well, no, most fairy tales were actually nightmare stories that were meant to make you scared and wary and teach you a lesson, and in teaching you a lesson, make sure you learn that lesson by making it as narratively impactful, and usually having some kind of horrible twist ending too. So that's what I always think about when I think about Gaiman's approach to the supernatural and the fantastic, is that he's sort of telling what I think of as like classic fairy tales. Like, well, of course, he's making them up though.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a fairy tale in that classic variety for sure. I mean, it's like even got the passage to another world, the crossing of that threshold, and I think the allure of that world slowly transforming into darkness and evil is just perfect fairy tale stuff. I love it so much.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever thought about this specific connection before, but the Other Mother definitely seems like one of the fairy of the classic tradition, where it's like, you cross into usually it's like the wood, but you cross into the realm of the fairy, and then they try to trap you.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, she's a fairy tale villain for sure.
Yeah,
and she's great. I guess one of the things I want to start with here is a pretty big decision was made in this movie very early on to do it in stop motion. This movie actually, when they first decided to make it, was going to be live action. When they cast Dakota Fanning to play Coraline in real life. And then a decision was made not too long after that to pursue stop motion. I think that was when Gaiman kind of went to Henry Selick and said, "Hey, I really loved A Nightmare Before Christmas. I want you to do something kind of like that." And then they found the folks at Leica who were willing to try to do what at the time was the most aggressive and challenging stop motion project ever. This movie's 140 minutes long. It was the longest stop motion animated film of its time. It is now in second place, only surpassed by Kubo and the Two Strings, another Leica picture. I think, I know we've talked about stop motion a lot, but I think it's important to say here at the beginning of this conversation, we cannot underestimate how fucking hard it is to do this shit. Like it's actually, when you just think about it, it almost overwhelms you. And that's part of the reason why I love stop motion animation as a concept, is because I am way too fucking impatient to ever be able to do it. Like, I just look at what it takes and I'm just like, there's no way I could ever do that. Ever.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, as a medium, it's the sort of thing that kind of makes sense to my mind as something for like a 10-minute short.
Yeah.
But for a feature-length movie, you're just like, oh my God, this is like an industrial project.
Yeah.
This is a massive scale undertaking. You can't imagine that by the end of this, anyone is having any fun anymore.
Yeah. Just to lay it out for y'all. It's a frame is, a frame is one shot, and films are projected at 24 frames per second. So roughly you have to take 24 pictures for every second of film that you have in your movie. And you have to, every frame in this movie, you have to move the stuff individually. And so these dolls are like incredibly well-made dolls, but you have to articulate 15 to 20 different movements for every shot. For every single shot. I think I read that in the making of this movie, on like a good week, they shot 7 seconds of film per animator. 140 minutes is this movie, and they shot 7 seconds per week per animator.
But of course, it's sort of being done in parallel, is what you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, I mean, there was a huge team of animators. They also, like, the sets were built and then duplicated. So they had like 6 versions of each set. And of course, hundreds of different versions of all the puppets and everything. So they had multiple animators working at the same time on different parts. So that's how you take what seems like a project that would take a decade and you work it down to a still ridiculous, but much more achievable 5 or 6 months. The other thing about this movie, Matt, is this was the first stop motion animated film shot in 3D. Which, like, it's not, you're like, oh, that sounds neat, until you actually like start to think about what that means. So like the way 3D works is they have 2 cameras that are roughly human eye width apart, right? And they take 2 pictures. And so you see the image from two slightly different angles. And then when you superimpose those angles on top of each other, they can kind of create a 3-dimensional image, right?
Sure.
Except when you're shooting stop motion, your scale is not human sized. It's puppet sized, because these are about 9-inch tall puppets. And so if you just shot normally in 3D with 2 cameras about human eye width apart, because of the scale of the puppets, that wouldn't work. It would just the 3-dimensional image would just be warped and terrible, and it just wouldn't work.
Okay.
So you have to shoot it at puppet eye length width, but that's centimeters. And so what they did is they built a rig where they had one camera, and then you shot it left eye, and then the camera automatically moved to the right slightly, and then you took the picture again right eye. And so you for every frame in this movie, they took 2 pictures. And so the animator not only has to pose the thing, but then also has to wait for the camera to go to move to the other side.
It's amazing. It's amazing that there's not like a detectable jitter, because you would think that like the slightest micron of displacement from the exact same position would be detectable as like a slight movement in the picture, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, but I don't know. They're the animators and the cinematographer and everything in this film was like top notch. It's just it's the kind of stop motion that you just never see. And I think, the one advantage that Leica has in general is they've made some of the most sophisticated looking puppets. These are like fully articulate, like every little bit of them moves. They use silicon to kind of like articulatable silicon that like you can move cheeks. And then they invented the technology where the face plates can snap on and off. So you just 3D print like 200 Coraline faces, and instead of like having to manually move her mouth around for dialogue, you can just snap on and off faceplates.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they made their job easier than it has ever been in stop motion animation up until the time, which is still incredibly difficult and incredibly hard. It is just amazing. Like I spent a lot of time researching this stuff because I'm obsessed with stop motion animation. But the other thing is, like, because the scale is so small, you got to make all the clothes for all the puppets. And like, think about a pair of jeans and you can see the seams on the jeans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't just sew those jeans with the normal seams that we have because those wouldn't match. They'd be too big. So they literally hired someone to hand sew sweaters, and they had to use it using like almost microscopic needles. It's just like every little bit of this is just fucking wild.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it all brings to this movie to life in a way that is distinct and unique. I mean, that's the thing about stop motion, and I promise I'll stop talking and we can like talk about the story and all the other stuff. But the thing about stop motion is, as amazing as it is that they pull this magic trick off, it still looks different from anything else, right? It's still a little bit shakier. The movements are still a little bit weirder. It still feels inhuman in a lot of ways. And I think that in this movie in particular, it makes it more eerie. It makes it more uncomfortable. Like the characters, like the design, like it just, the choice to do this in stop motion, I think, takes what is a wonderful little fairy tale and then elevates it to something truly unique and creepy looking.
Yeah, exactly. The uncanniness of it really works in its favor because it is this creepy fairy tale.
Yeah.
And it pervades with this sense of unreality and fantasy, and you're never really sure what's real. I'm not going to let you stop talking about stop motion quite yet. I wanted to ask whether was any CGI used in this movie at all? And I ask just because there are certain things that I just have a hard time believing were done in stop motion.
So in this movie, basically no. There might have been a few things here and there, but I think Henry Selick was very, very particular that he wanted everything to be handmade and hand created. In later Leica films, they do find a way to like pretty amazingly and effortlessly blend computer graphics and stop motion in a way that I think really works. But this movie in particular, because of Selick, they were very, very particular that basically nothing is stop motion. So the thing you're asking me right about now is the fog. How the fuck did they do the fog?
How'd they do the fog? Because
they couldn't actually have the fog on set because, it's 30 hours of taking individual pictures, and that would never work because the most important part of stop motion is only the things that you want to move in between the shots move. And if everything, so the fog would fuck all that up. So what they did with the fog is they hired 3 guys to get a bunch of dry ice and just film dry ice and them doing different stuff in dry ice for hours. And then they just composited the dry ice onto the frame. And then like in a place where like a character moves and pushes back the fog a little bit, they just found one of the times when one of them like threw something into the fog and moved it a little bit and just composited that into the scene. It's fucking nuts, man. It's nuts.
I was going to specifically ask about the time when she tries to leave the house and ends up going to this like white world. And then when she goes back to the house, it like reassembles itself piece by piece. And I was like, man, if that was real, that is real. So hard to like believe and understand how they did that.
Yeah, I mean, they were so computer graphics averse that like it gets to the point where we're seeing the garden come to life for the first time, and it's like, so you're telling me animators like individually animated like 700 of the little flowers blooming? No, actually what they did is they built one larger version of the flower blooming and they stuck it in a room with a bunch of mirrors. And so they put the camera there, and because of the mirrors, they got like 40 different angles of a flower blooming and then just composited all those different angles on top of this. It's like, it's nuts stuff like that, man. And remember when she tosses the doll in the fire and the fire is burning? Well, the fire is obviously not stop motion animation because you can't do that. So you would think, oh, well, okay, they use CG for the fire. No. a man hand drew fire.
Uh-huh.
He hand drew like 500 frames of fire, and then he uploaded it to a computer and composited it in. But that's hand drawn fire, and it's just it's like every choice they made the hardest possible one for themselves. But ultimately, I think the right one.
Yeah, right, because it all looks exactly consistent.
Yeah.
And I guess I must not have watched this movie recently, because I've had this big modern TV for a while, but I don't remember watching this movie on it. And the reason I specifically say that is like I was just blown away. Like I already knew I love this movie, but just watching it on like a nice crisp big TV where you can really see the detail, it's just gorgeous. It's just the colors, the richness of the framing of every shot. I mean, it's definitely one of those movies where you can say every frame is a painting, because every frame had a huge amount of thought and precision put into it, even more so than a usual movie.
That's the funnest. That's the most fun part about stop motion to me, is because each frame takes so much time to shoot. Each frame gets a lot more individual time than just about any other type of animation or filmmaking in general. It's just because of that, because they know, and they're constantly trying to solve problems within these individual frames. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous, man.
Yeah. I think it's fair that we spend a lot of time talking about the visual aspect of this movie, though. Not just the stop motion, but also just like the design, the way that there's a characteristic sort of cartoony appearance to the characters, which it's great. It's very specific. The house is this sort of like almost like it's almost Real House, but maybe like things kind of lean in ways that are unrealistic, which works.
It's this very specific kind of art style, and I'm struggling for the right words to. It feels out of time. Like it feels like an art style from the 50s or the 60s. Like especially when we get into the other world, where it's just like the type of furniture, not counting the bug furniture, but like just the way everything looks has this like out of time type of look to it. Even like in the father's study with the boxes stacked, like the boxes are stacked precariously, but I don't know. There's just something really unique and distinct about it.
Yeah. A lot of it seems to be, not all of it, but there's this feeling throughout it of like, this is being seen by Coraline. This is a world seen from the perspective of this 11-year-old girl. And so very often you're kind of, the camera is kind of lower and you're looking kind of up, which, when you're watching that as an adult, it makes you remember like, oh yeah, I used to see the world in a way where like a door frame, for example, is like this massive archway. And it's like now,
sure,
the door is only a few inches above the top of your head, really. And you don't think about that at all anymore. But the movie makes you feel what it felt like to be a smaller person living in a world designed for adults. Also, the real world is super rainy and dreary and depressing.
Yeah.
And that is achieved. I mean, the obvious way you would do it is just the color scheme, the fact that it's always cloudy, and the light is just kind of this diffused light that just kind of seems like it's overcast everywhere. And,
it just feels like Pacific Northwest winter, and that creeps into the house as well, where all the colors are just a little bit more muted, like a big brown oak door in the other realm would just be this kind of muted gray in this it's just it's really great. And it's like, it's not as if the world is dead in the real world, it's just lesser, it's just more muted and quieter, and it's like there is still life there, but it's just hidden in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's reflecting the fact that obviously this character isn't happy about having to move away from her friends. Her parents are both preoccupied and stressed out and not giving her attention. And also the weather is bad, and it just creates this environment that's just dreary and sad, and she wants to escape from it. So I just love that that's done visually, right, as well as, of course, narratively.
Yeah, certainly. And I love how that bleeds over into our character designs as well. I think the character of Father is like one of my favorite designs in the world, because he's so, like you said, they're not human looking, like they're cartoonish, they're exaggerated, and the way he holds himself, the way he kind of leans over his computer and his exaggeratedly long face is kind of like he's got hunched back, and then the normal real world version of him he's got his very dark 5 o'clock shadow. His eyes are like so dark and they're so like circled that it almost looks like he's been punched. Like they look bruised, and he just looks exhausted and lifeless. And then of course the mother has that neck brace that she's wearing almost the entire movie, and she's like, which makes her look like it is a neck brace, right? Because she was in a car accident.
Yeah, there's an accident that's referenced without a whole lot of specificity, but I think that's one element that just makes you feel like, okay, well, the mom is dealing with the aftermath of some stressful event, and so she's just really preoccupied.
Yeah, and I think the funny thing about the neck brace is how it's designed is it also makes it seem like she's got the world's highest turtleneck. Like it's just like the turtleneck that's taking over her face almost, and it just shows how tight and unflexible she is, which goes into Coraline's frustration with her mom. It all works, and then of course you mirror that perfectly with the other versions of herself, where her mom is like all dolled up in makeup and wearing dresses and
smiling all the time.
Yes, smiling, and then her father like looks rested. His hair is combed, the dark shadows under his eyes are gone, and everything's better except for those creepy eyes.
It's just and the fact that he's like a pumpkin actually.
I mean the reveal that he's. I love that when other mother is just like, come on, pumpkin. And you're like, oh, yeah, he's literally a pumpkin. Yeah.
And then he becomes more of a pumpkin as the movie goes on. But I love just little things like in real life, he's sitting in front of a keyboard all day, a computer keyboard, of course. And then in the other world, he's sitting in front of a keyboard, which is a piano keyboard in this case.
Yeah. And then other mother is in the kitchen in both versions, but in one she's cooking and the other she's working.
Right.
So she's still in the kitchen the whole time, but doing different things. Yeah. I mean, it's perfect because it's the natural like child idealized version of what your parents would be, right? Like she wants these attentive parents that dote her with food and gifts and give her everything she wants and have all the time in the world for her. And that's part. I mean, a lot of that, like, it's not saying her parents were being perfect to her, but a lot of this is her dealing with that life isn't the perfect idealized version of what you want it to be.
And I mean, I think a big part of it is realizing like your parents are their own people, and sometimes they have to do their own things, and it's a very she's at that perfect age. It's funny, we're also reading the Stephen King story, Low Men in Yellow Coats, that also stars an 11-year-old child, and it just really struck home to me how like that's just such a perfect between age, such a perfect liminal time where there's so many of the trappings of childhood, but also you are mature enough to understand things of adulthood if they're put in front of your face.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I mean, this is actually something I want to talk to you about, Coraline. Does she suck? Because I think actually the character that we meet is like not the best. Like she's whiny, she's impatient, like she's immediately mean to Wybie, like immediately mean to this kid.
She's very mean to Wybie for very little reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's kind of a selfish brat. Like she's basically a selfish brat in the beginning. We aren't, it's not the sort of movie where we're meant to just unreservedly side with the child character and see that the adult characters are being ogres. It's not that at all. It's the child character kind of unreasonably is demanding everyone's attention. And the parents are like, just entertain yourself. It's a new house. Like, I mean, it's actually kind of funny when you think about it, because it's like, I'm pretty sure that as a child, if I were in a new house, I could have kept myself entertained for hours, just exploring things and messing around. But it's complicated because she's also kind of unhappy that she had to move, and there's a lot of subtext there.
She's like, I think that's why she's so mean to Wybie, is like, I don't want new friends. I want my old friends. And I don't like you. I mean, for poor Wybie is he's a fascinating character. And as I said, he's one that's completely added for this version of the story. Like we meet him when he's on his bike that like sounds like a motorcycle. I don't know what's up with that bike, man, but it's like it's not just a normal bicycle. And he's got his random skull hat with the 3 different scopes on it. Like he's just kind of a weird little kid.
Yeah.
The way like the way when we see other YB, like the ways that they're similar, and like the way he kind of cocks his head and holds himself just like differently. He's just odd, and she's completely uninterested in that kind of odd.
Yeah, I actually like when, you know, she tries to tell him about the other world, and you know, his reaction to her, like she's crazy, and it's like, yeah, she's not doing a good job selling this.
No, yeah, because she's like, she tells him and then like immediately gets mad at him for not believing her instantly.
Yeah,
and I think lack of patience is a really core trait of this character, because like I think what the end of the movie kind of shows us, when she's with her parents planting tulips in the garden and finally getting the things that she's been wanting all movie, is she just had to like wait for them. Like presumably we kind of get told her mother was in an accident and they've just moved out here and they're behind on the catalog that they need to get done. And so they're just absolutely swamped with work. And a lot of what her mom continues to say to her over and over again is just like, hey, if you just wait, if you just give me some time to get my work done, I promise you we'll get the stuff done that you need. We'll do these things that you want to do. You just got to give us a chance to catch up, because we got this whole move. Like we don't actually ever learn like what the impetus of the move was, like why they needed to do it. But I don't know. There's a lot of like in between the lines, I think, of they're not doing great. And this catalog is like basically their make or break thing. If they don't get this done, they're in a lot of financial trouble.
And it seems like Coraline is not really aware of that, actually.
Yeah.
But this is something that it seems like the grown-ups are very stressed out about.
Yeah, especially in this house that is kind of, I don't know, like we have our upstairs neighbor who is, you know, training mice for this circus performance that is probably never going to happen, because like his whole thing is like, they'll be ready soon. Just trust me, it'll happen. And then we have the 2 downstairs neighbors that are like kind of washed up actresses that are, you know, old and not having any parts anymore. And like, so it seems like this is kind of the place where dreams go to die. And so like this risk of them falling into the same never quite achieving the success that they wanted trap is really present here. And so I think that helps accentuate Coraline's the frustration with Coraline's complete lack of patience. And it's like, no, you got to, if they fuck this up, they're in trouble.
It's very adjacent to the abyss. Some of our listeners will appreciate that. But I'm not going to explain that, but I sort of think that actually works, because it is adjacent to a supernatural realm that eats children. Yeah. And so just on that note of like Coraline kind of starting out unlikable, but getting sort of taught the right lesson. The first interaction she has with the cat is actually just like throwing a rock at a sound that she hears, and then the cat screaming because she's either hit the cat or scared the cat. And then by the end, the cat is literally saves her life and saves everyone's life by bringing her the final ghost eye. And so it's just this example of like people, and then in the end, you know, YB saves her also. So it's these specific characters who she has kind of been horrible to, or at the very least rude to. She was kind of rude to the cat.
Oh yeah, she's really rude to the cat. Yeah,
and then these characters still end up saving her. I mean, God, I think it's so interesting too, because like she throws the cat at the other mother, which is kind of messed up, actually.
Yeah, it's a real dick move, and like that's the first thing she says to the cat when it comes back is like, "Hey, sorry." I mean, at least I think that shows the growth that she's willing to apologize for that action and recognize the cat as something that is worth like treating well and apologizing to when you do bad stuff. But yeah, like, I do think that's really interesting, because if you want to track her growth as a character throughout the book, or the movie, that is an interesting call, that like in her desperation, she's just like, "Ah, yes, another tool in my arsenal. Go, cat, go." Yeah. And the cat could have easily just been killed in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's great. I like that it doesn't sit in any of the typical tropey, default ways of going about this vague sort of story. It's a much more about the growth of the character, and a lot more complexity and a lot more stuff going on subtextually than you kind of expect to see in a story like this.
Can we actually talk about like the very, very beginning of the movie? Because I actually I've seen this movie many times, and I think maybe I haven't watched it from beginning to end very often, because I forgot that what the movie opens on is the creation of the Coraline doll.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, it also opens on the dismantling and destruction of what I guess was one of the three other children. The doll that was used for one of the three other children is kind of ripped apart and repurposed to make the Coraline doll.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really great kind of tone setting opening that really gets you to understand exactly what this story is going to be, because there's this very like slow, distinct destruction of this doll in ways that accentuate, like he gets his, like the button eyes are slowly slipped out, and then she takes the shears to his mouth and like rips his mouth open, spilling the fuzz out. There's like just a lot of imagery that if you replace the imagery we're seeing with like any kind of guts or viscera, bam, you have a rated R movie. But like, because it's a stuffed animal, it's okay. But I don't know, like it's a great ominous note to start your film on, I think.
Absolutely.
Like, I think we see the doll like on a table, this really dark, muted, spooky table with like all these sharp instruments surrounding him. So I just love it so much.
And isn't it sort of a coy little spoiler, because it's actually the needle hands of the other mother doing all this?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah, it's funny because I definitely had noticed that on a previous viewing, but I think it did take me a few viewings to realize like, oh, like it's literally the other mother's hands, but you don't realize that that's what you're really seeing until much later in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a fun touch to like reveal that, and then but you haven't really told us what you've revealed, and so you don't figure it out.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, I do love we were talking about the visuals and just the design. We talked about the design of the cartooniness of the characters, but like just the other mother design is just absolute nightmare fuel. So she goes from being her mom to being kind of like a stretched out witch looking version of her mom. But then she goes all the way to just being like a spider made of needles, and it's utterly terrifying. And that was one thing that was fun to watch with my kids, because they were scared, but in a way that was like exciting for them. They weren't like crying and telling me to turn the movie off, or anything like that. It was, but like clearly the character design and all of the stuff at the end was really, really working on them.
That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, and you're totally right that her design and the kind of, I mean, that's the wonderful thing going on in this movie is like, as Coraline is winning, you almost sense that other mother's power is being drained, because the world is collapsing around her. Like that's why other fathers like turning into that pumpkin. We see that the other version of the circus performer guy, like he's not even there anymore. By the confrontation with him to try to get the kid's eye is just rats in a trench coat. That horrifying, wonderful scene where she's fighting against like this trench coat version of him with it's just rats. The deterioration of this world is just really great. And you see like even the bug chairs that like come over and suggest Coraline sits down on them looked like tired and used up. Like it's just, you kind of see the world itself collapsing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, other mother seems so formidable and unbeatable as an antagonist for most of the movie, but then you can almost notice at the same time in the background that indeed, as she takes the ghost eyes, she is sapping the other mother's power, and maybe she only ever has enough magical power to ensnare one more child, and if she loses, if she loses the game once, then she's she kind of shrivels up. So you could believe that maybe she's totally defeated, but also in the fun way of all fairy tales, you don't quite believe that she's defeated forever.
Yeah, I mean, because the only reason they stop her is because they get rid of the key. Like she's still alive at the other side of that door. There's just no other key.
Yeah.
And I think we would be remiss talking about Other Mother if we don't talk about Terry Hatcher, who I think is the perfect casting for this role. Terry Hatcher, I don't know, I just haven't seen her in much in my life outside of Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. But I think she's perfect in this role. She has this ability to do the sweet and the scary at the same time. Like the same performance can give us Other Mother the first time Coraline goes in there, and Other Mother by the end of the movie is a testament to her skill. And I think it's really fantastic the way she can just turn on that barbarous venom, the anger and the jealousy, and the way she can kind of it's kind of a needle that she's slowly turning up over the course of the movie. I love it so much.
Yeah,
Terry Hatcher, great.
Yep, absolutely. Not much to add there. I agree. Like she does both characters, right? They're totally different characters. And yeah, as she reveals the greed but also the kind of like gloating nature of the Other Mother. And then you know, Dakota Fanning, speaking of performances, it's kind of perfect. Can't really imagine it any other way.
Yeah, gosh, she's just Dakota Fanning, who was just one of the best child actors ever, right? She was so good in everything she did. Like she just, like it's fun. Like you go listen to interviews with her talking about this movie, and like you see the childness poke out at times, where she's like there'll just be this random scene, and it'll be like, well, Coraline, her hair is blue, and you're just like, thanks, Dakota. But then she'll like switch into professional mode and just be talking about like how Selleck directed her in this movie, and it's like, oh, I'm talking to an adult right now. And it's wild.
Yeah, she's a professional, absolutely. Yeah, it's great.
Man, this entire conversation, what I've been doing is just like I have IMDb open to the photo gallery, and I'm just flipping through images from this movie because like I just can't help myself, and I just love how fucking weird and amazing this movie looks, and like everything about it is weird. Everything about it, like you have a whole show with the two women in front of a dog audience, and then one of them is like basically naked. The one with the giant boobs is basically naked, and then they unzip their old lady suits and their young ladies underneath it, and it's just like it's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Well, I love the dogs. I love how they're sewing one of the dogs into an angel costume, and the dog
is about to die.
He's about to die, and the dog is like, I don't like this. I don't know what this means. And then the dogs are like horrifying vampire monsters at the end. It's
like border collie bat things. Yeah, it's just like the creativity and the weirdness on display is just all part of what the mood of this movie becomes. And like I think the linchpin of all this to me is those button eyes and the way this movie shoots those button eyes. They're just so disturbing. Like just looking at the character, like they're just so weird looking and uncomfortable looking. And you take away the thing of a body that brings the most life to it, the eyes, and there's no expression there anymore. It's just really, really wonderful.
Yeah. So sharp you won't feel a thing.
Like, I don't know. The only suspension of disbelief this movie makes me go under is this idea that those three other children were told by their other mothers, let me just sew these buttons into your eyes. And they were just like, oh, okay, yeah. I guess you seem to know what you're doing, other mother. Like,
I think the most you could, the direction I would take that is just to say maybe their lives were much worse than Coraline's is. Because sure. the other mother plays and preys on, I guess you could say either one, plays on and preys on the child's specific grievances with their life. And okay, so Coraline is annoyed that her mom doesn't have time for her and doesn't cook her dinner, and her dad doesn't play with her, and so the other mother provides those specific things and also just gives her sort of a circus of delights on the side. But really, Coraline's life is not objectively that bad. But you can imagine some girl living in the 40s or whatever might have a much worse life, and that this would actually be appealing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I mean, like, how, like, if they were trapped and unable to get out, like Coraline was, like, how long into that thing would you just finally give up and relent and be like, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't mention Keith David as the cat is, of course, a fantastic addition.
Oh yeah, he's wonderful. I love the cat. I love the concept of the cat talking in other world. It's such a fun little twist on the whole thing.
Yeah, very, very fun, very memorable. Just, I don't know, overall extremely good movie. I wonder if anybody's listening who hasn't watched this movie, like, this is up there for me in the list of movies that I love, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the desire to, like, rank it right now, but it's just a perfect little movie. It's
just there to drink up anytime. Like, you just bask in it. Like, I mean, really, just like its atmosphere, its tone, it's cute and it's weird all at the same time. I mean, it's exactly what you'd want. I mean, this is, I think, maybe at the end of the conversation, it's finally time to have this, and it will serve as a good transition to what we're going to talk about after this. But, like, I think more kids movies should be weird and kind of scary like this. I do. Like, not that, like, we should set out to scare the shit out of kids, but I do think we should get them used to stories that can make them uncomfortable and a little bit scared. Not like I'm going to have nightmares for weeks scared, but, like, just a little bit like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I like what's happening here. I think that is an important experience in the education of the power of storytelling, and part of existing in this world, right, is sometimes you're going to get scared and you need to learn how to process that. And I think that's a tool that storytelling can be for a child, is like learning how to process feelings of discomfort and fear and do it in a safe manner where it's just some images on a screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can kind of segue in and out of that, but like, I never saw anything that gave me nightmares for any amount of time, really. And I saw a lot of, movies I shouldn't have seen. So, like, I just wanted to relate the story of, this last watch that I did with my kids, and my 5-year-old's kind of running around, and the way she watches movies is that sometimes she's not watching the movie, and sometimes she's sitting on her head, upside down on the couch watching the movie. And it just so happened that during the finale, when the other, Coraline is fighting the other mother on the spider web, and then she runs through the door, my 5-year-old was standing, like, right in front of the TV, like, riveted, staring directly at the TV. And as the final sequence happens, where the door's like telescoping toward the camera in like these lurching steps, and you hear the other mother, like, there's like slam, 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 the other mother is screaming like, "No, you can't leave!" And she's just like amazing, like, and like the lights are just going crazy. It's just like visual sonic cacophony. And my daughter, like, she's like standing there like deer in headlights, and then as the final slam happens and Coraline like stumbles back through the door, my daughter just like jumps backward in place, and she has this like like wonderful like scared expression, and then she looks over at me and she smiles. She goes, "That was scary." and I'm like, this is like perfect. This is like exactly what we're talking about, where she was genuinely scared. She was so startled, she jumped. She physically jumped, and it wasn't like a fake or a put on or whatever. Like, it got to her, but then she immediately was like, that was fun. Like, that was her reaction to it. And that's the kind of thing that I think we're talking about. Like, you don't want to traumatize kids, but you want to give them little morsels of like what you can do with film. And that's kind of what Halloween is about. This is November, but we did just go through Halloween season, and I always think it's interesting how, you go into a Halloween store and there's kind of horrible imagery all over the place.
Yeah,
and we expose kids to that willingly, obviously, and I think it's good to kind of get inured to that sort of thing.
I totally agree. I totally agree with this. I like, this is, and I think there is a these are movies that end up being really popular. Like A Nightmare on Elm Street, not Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare Before Christmas was a movie that didn't do very well on opening, but has since like become kind of like a cultural touchstone. And I think it's because in reality, like I wonder if those test screenings where the kids didn't like it, was it the kids not liking it, or was it the parents being all in a huff because they watched their kids get scared? And that they like, I don't take my kids to movies to get scared at things. And like you said, we're not saying like your kid should watch The Descent or anything like that. It's just like that this particular kind of, not jump scared, just like imagery, just like this slightly disturbing, slightly off, slightly weird imagery that to the imaginative mind of a child, like is something much bigger and more powerful than we can imagine. I think is good to experience some of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just feel like in the 80s and that like there was so much more of that, like there was so much more of like just shit that was for kids, but it was weird as hell.
Yeah. I mean, should we start talking about some of the stuff that came out when we were kids that maybe scared us and how we dealt with that?
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I want to do that. I guess I think we should wrap up Coraline at least and say how we're voting.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
This is a vote. I think that how we're voting on this one is pretty obvious. But Matt, what are you gonna do?
Oh, hell yes. And I think this is a movie that maybe a lot of people haven't seen, and so that makes me want to put it on the list even more.
Yeah, I would be very happy with this movie on a list. If I'm, we've every time we do this, we're like, okay, well, what are the rules of our list, right? and the point is that we don't have rules of our list. But like, if I'm gonna put one stop motion animation movie on my list, do I want it to be this one? And part of me is like, well, no, I mean, Kubo is my favorite Leica film. It's one of my favorite stop motion animation films. I love that movie to death, and one day we'll have to do a whole episode on that. But I don't. I make the rules, and I say there get to be at least 2 stop motion films on our list, and therefore Coraline has more than earned its spot on it. It's a wonderful little movie. It's powerful art in the best ways. A great fairy tale that I think is as we said is good for kids to see.
I say that people should make more stop motion films, and then we could have plenty of stop motion films.
There we go. We could make a whole list of stop motion canon films.
All films should be stop motion.
No, that's ridiculous.
Oh, okay.
Matt, you took it one too far.
Okay. I always do that.
All right. So that's our vote, but we want to know what you guys think. So make sure you check the link in the show notes of this very episode. It will take you to our Patreon page where you get to vote for this poll. You do not have to be a patron to vote. It is open to the public. So if you're not a patron and you want to vote, that's fine. But apparently we learned this last month, Matt. The only way you can leave a comment on the Patreon poll is if you are a patron. They don't, even if it's a public post, they don't let public commenting happen, which is very annoying. I do not like it. Oh. So if you're not a patron and you want to tell us why, yes or no, you voted, you can reach out to us at doofmedia@gmail.com. You can direct message us on Twitter @doofmedia. We do want to hear from y'all, especially if you're going to vote no, especially if your vote differs from what ours is. That's when I really want to get your opinion. Not because I want to chastise it, but I'm just generally curious.
Yeah, me too.
Doof. All right, that's going to do it for Coraline. And now, Matt, let's get back to the topic we were talking about. Let's talk about the things that scared us when we were kids and why we love them.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to mention, just because you mentioned Nightmare Before Christmas, that came out when I was, I think, 8. Maybe not. Maybe I had just turned 8, I think. Yeah. And there was stuff in that movie that scared me. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when I think about it, the stuff that scared me was like maybe not the stuff people would assume, or maybe not the stuff adults would assume, because it wasn't like, Shrunken Heads or like a werewolf man. It was like specifically like the montage toward the beginning where it's got the like, I am the thing hiding under your stair, and it's like a dark, indistinct creature living under your stairs. And that just reminds me how much when I was on the little kid side, like the scariest stuff was like the implication that there's a little creature or something hiding under things or in dark spaces or maybe in the closet or under the bed or behind the couch. And it didn't really matter what the thing looked like. Like another thing I was terrified of was the critters, which are basically like a comedy monster. And I don't even think I like watched the movie Critters. I think I just like saw a couple of scenes of Critters on the TV at one point. And so I guess I'm just mentioning this to say, like, people think that kids are going to be scared of like violence and it's like, no, kids aren't really. I don't think kids are scared of violence. Kids are scared of little monsters, basically. That at least that's what I remember being scared of.
Sure. This is, I think, great because one of my things is the 1989 film All Dogs Go to Heaven. This movie came out when I was 4, but I probably did not watch it when I was 4. I was probably a little bit older. This is a terrifying fucking movie in a lot of ways. It's very scary. Like everything, there's so many things about it that are scary. Carface is a very scary villain. There's one point where Charlie dreams of going to hell, and the imagery from hell is very scary. But to your point, the thing that I remember being scared of most in this movie is when Charlie is in heaven and decides he wants to leave. And I just remember the angel, the pink dog angel, screaming at him, "You can never come back!" Like freaking out because he took his watch and decided to leave. And just like the terror in her voice, and like that she's like, "You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to." Like, that is the thing that imprints me the most in this movie. Which is so weird because I don't think maybe no one else would say that, but just like the intensity with which she's freaking out as Charlie is breaking all these rules of heaven and possibly making sure he bans himself from heaven for all eternity. It's just really, really good stuff.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm struggling to think of an example, but I totally feel you where it's like a really strong sort of scary intensity of emotion, even if you don't really understand the context of it.
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't really understand the metaphysical implications of being banned from heaven, there still might be something really scary about just the way this person is behaving. It seems inhuman and weird.
Yeah, I think it's especially like to a child, or maybe I should just not say. Maybe I should say, to me, bad guys yell. So when I see like Carface yell, I'm like, well, Carface is a bad guy. Of course he's yelling. Of course he's really exaggerately emotional and angry and loud. Like, that makes sense. He's a bad guy. But then this dog angel's supposed to be good guy, right? So it's like good guy dog angel that is suddenly like freaking out. And so when the good characters are yelling and freaking out, that almost enhances the emotion to a greater point where you're just like, oh my God, this is too much for me. This is overwhelming for my child brain. And therefore I deposit it in the scary part of my brain because I don't fully understand what's happening here.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, it's funny. For some reason that just triggered a memory of the fact that when I went to see, I think it was, I don't know if it was Snow White or Sleeping Beauty or what, because I don't remember when things came out exactly. One of those movies, apparently my mom had to take me out of the theater because I was crying or something. But I would have been like, I literally don't remember it, so I must have been 2 or 3. And I think that's the situation where it's literally just like it's loud and the characters running around scared in the dark forest, and that's it. Like, it's just too much stimulation and the kid doesn't know how to process it. But I don't really think that's what we're talking about. I think when you're like 2 or 3, it's just like, kid doesn't really know what they're seeing. You know, it's funny. I have this very clear memory of this image from the film Aliens, and it's a gigantic creature that the people are standing, and it's behind glass, and the people are standing next to the creature that's behind glass. And of course, what I was really seeing was the face huggers in the glass tanks. But because of the forced perspective of the shot, my child brain thought that it was a gigantic creature. And that's just an example of the way your dumb child brain will misinterpret things that seem like you couldn't possibly misinterpret it.
That's great because, I mean, This whole conversation is bringing back so many memories because I'm about to talk to you about Dino Riders. You know Dino Riders. You love Dino Riders.
Love Dino Riders.
Do you remember how Dino Riders opens? Do you have memory of that opening sequence?
I do.
Where it's real life people in a museum, but they're kind of it's I don't know what the term is, but it's like a shot that is made to look like it's drawn, where like you take the real life shot and just like layer like hand drawn effects over it.
I mean, I call that rotoscope. I don't know if that's the right answer.
I think that's right. Well, and then like one of the kids is just standing there bored, and then he sees some glowing light from one of the other rooms, and he goes in there, and like the pieces of the dinosaur bones are glowing, and then they come to life and start battling each other. It's not that scared me. Like I don't think I was scared, but it was just creepy in a way. And I think it has to do a lot with the rotoscoping, that it just like already put you in an unsettling mood because this isn't quite real looking. And then like the glowing light, I have this very distinct memory of like, that's part of the reason why I was so into Dino Riders, because it was such a weird, creepy type of opening for a cartoon about aliens that ride on dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's funny because that has nothing to do with the Dino Riders story.
Nothing at all. Nothing
just
at
the
all.
hook. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of were you feeling inclined to talk about the Neverending Story at all?
I didn't put it on my list, but it's definitely one of those for sure.
So the reason I mention it is not. It's funny because like I thought that the horse drowning in the swamp was like sad, but it didn't really scare me. And I thought that Gmork the monster wolf was like, kind of scary, but like not in a way that made me feel like, oh, I want to hide my eyes or whatever. What was always unnerving and like deeply memorable about the movie was the creepy pair of statues where if you try to walk across the open space, then they'll laser you with their eyes. Like something about like the design of those things and the way that like they had this like ethereal, unearthly light, and the idea, of course, that you have to have. I guess it was like you have to have a pure heart, or they're gonna vaporize you. And there was like a dead knight laying there. That was what was scary to me. And it's funny because like I don't remember other kids being scared of that, but it was just like such a powerful image to my little kid brain.
Yeah. No, I like that. I mean, the concept of the nothing was always something that really creeped me out. I think when I was a kid, the thing I was most scared with was like the thing that I couldn't see, but that was gestured to. I think that's actually why the opening of Dino Riders freaked me out a bit. It was not because of actually seeing the dinosaurs, but like that ominous light coming from the other room shining on his face. That's the part that was like creepy to me. And so like the nothing is just like that concept, but made big and huge. And like the size and scale of a thing that I can't even see is just like overwhelming in a lot of ways. So the nothing made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about the dead horse, and like, I think like if I watched the movie now, it would probably break my heart. But as a kid, I don't have a lot of distinct memories of that other than being like, oh, that's sad. Poor horse. Yeah,
right. It's funny at certain kid ages, you're actually more prone to be like, get out of there. Just get out of there. What's wrong with you? Like you're like annoyed and frustrated. It's funny. It must be some kind of developmental stage where you're just like, God, I don't understand why that stupid horse didn't just get out. Like it's not like you don't have empathy. It's more like you're at some stage where you're all about solving problems.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even know, like at various stages, like I don't even know if you fully understand like what dead means.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, like I don't even remember what it was, but I have this very distinct memory of my childhood where I'm watching like probably like a made for TV movie with my mom, and it's one of those basic cable drama things, and it has a little girl in it, and at one point the little girl dies, and I just have this very distinct memory of like asking my mom, okay, but when's she gonna come back? And my mom's like, she's dead. And it's like the first time my brain tried to get my head around the concept of dying and just like it being this completely overwhelming thing for me at the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I think like maybe the first time I watched Neverending Story, like I didn't even fully conceptualize that the horse was dead.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and gone and not going to come back later.
Sure. And I think the horror of death is something that you gradually awaken to over the course of time.
Yep.
Because it's not like a small. I think my 5-year-old understands the basic facts about death, but hasn't quite fully understood the existential horror of it. It's. I always think this is funny. My mom took me. I don't know why exactly, but she took me to see the Mel Gibson version of Hamlet in 1990. So I was 5. I'm pretty sure.
That'd be a lot. That'd be a lot.
Yeah,
that's a long movie too.
I'm pretty sure she just wanted to see it and figured I would be like benefited by the culture of it or something. But I was so sad that Hamlet died, and I remember like crying walking out of the theater because Hamlet was dead. Spoilers. And so like I clearly, that worked on me, even though that's like that's Shakespeare. Yeah, that wasn't a scary event, but that was just a story about a movie working on a kid in a way that maybe you wouldn't expect it to. Another thing that scared me, honestly, Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park came out when we were 7 or 8, and I was worried that raptors were in my house. That movie. Not only did it scare me while I was watching it, but it scared me after. That was one of the, actually, frankly, Jurassic Park's one of the few movies where I sort of like took the fear home with me. Most movies you're just kind of scared in the moment, but every once in a while you'll watch one and you're like, oh no, now I'm scared of that there's like going to be aliens or dinosaurs in my closet or whatever.
You want to know what's funny?
What?
The thing that scared me the most about Jurassic Park was Timmy getting shocked on the electric fence. I think there was just this thing for me where I thought the dinosaurs were cool, but I was never really afraid of them. I think probably a little more afraid of the raptors than the T-Rex, because the raptors just seemed more, I don't know, ominous and cruel, and the T-Rex just seemed like a big, just a Godzilla. But yeah, I don't know, like the thing that really sat with me in my 7-year-old brain was that electric fence and like what that must have been like. And I think part of it is just the frustration of it when you're just like with the horse with Timmy on that electric fence, you're like, just climb up the fence, dude. Just hurry up. Just hurry up.
No, what are you doing?
Yeah. And it's like Steven Spielberg at his best, right? Because it's this wonderful intercut between him freaking out on the fence and Alan saying, I'm going to count to 3 while we cut over to Ellie, like slowly turning the park systems back online in the control room. And it's like, it's this great like back and forth. And it's so great because Spielberg really knows what he's doing, man. Because it's like this in Ellie's playing the scene as one of excitement because she's bringing the park back on. Like she's rebooting the power systems, and it's like, yay, finally our characters have a chance, while at the same time turning that same thing into this ominous moment of possible death. It's like, it's perfect, man. God, Spielberg.
Another great thing about that is that just before it happens, Alan's like, all right, I'm coming up to get you, even though he knows the risk. And then finally that's what gets Timmy to say he's going to jump, but then it's too late. So and then he's dead. And the movie's over.
I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And then one of the best jokes in the movie where Tim says, all right, I'm going to jump off in 3. 1, 2. And then he gets shocked and goes flying. And the first thing he says when he wakes up is 3.
Yeah. Love it.
It's a good joke. It's a good joke.
It's a good joke. It's
a movie.
Jurassic Park's a good movie. I don't know if you knew that.
Here's the thing about Jurassic Park is it's a great movie, and it also came out the same year that Schindler's List came out. So just forever remember that in 1993, is that when that movie came out? Steven Spielberg released both Jurassic Park, one of the all-time best monster/action movies ever, and Schindler's List, one of the best dramas ever made. Like, it's just, holy shit, man. What a guy.
Do you ever just watch the T-Rex scene on YouTube? Do you ever just sit there and watch that?
I just turn that movie on all the time, man. I love that movie. I think that movie was one of the first experiences I had with the concept of naturalistic dialogue, because that's the way that movie is written, is like the characters talk over each other a lot and they mumble a lot, and it's just like sometimes you can't even understand what they say because they're two characters talking at the same time and you can only listen to one of them. I don't know. I just, when I was younger, I found that whole thing fascinating because I hadn't heard much of that. Like, it's just the way all the actors chose to perform and the way Spielberg kind of encouraged that kind of performance was really interesting to me.
Yeah, it really draws you in the movie and makes you feel like, it's stuff that's really happening, which makes the horror hit harder.
Yeah. Do you have any other spooky stuff?
I was really scared of Snuffleupagus when I was 2. So okay, just I think maybe it's worth it just to sort of signpost like literally maybe just one example of like going too far. And what I'll say is I watched Predator at some age, I don't remember what age, and I remember the image where like the Predator is sort of like he's up in the tree and he like rips. He's like holding the base of the spine and he like rips the whole spinal cord with the skull attached to the end out of the body. And that was like an image that was like burned into my mind. And I would like picture it involuntarily in kind of an intrusive way for a little while. I mean, not long. Like, it's not like I had like a serious problem with this, but it's just the example of like, probably shouldn't have seen that at whatever age that was.
Sure.
And I don't know where the line is with that kind of thing. And also it's not like it's not like it messed me up. It's just like, that was pretty fucked up, actually.
Sure.
I don't know if you had any similar anecdotes.
I don't remember anything specifically. I mean, like the thing that I was scared of most when I was a kid is I had this recurring dream where I wake up in my bed and go out into the hallway. My parents' bedroom was right across the hallway, and I'd go into their room and open their door, and there would be this shadowy figure kind of standing in the corner of their room that would then rush me. And I've thought my entire life, like trying to pinpoint, like, is there a thing I saw that created that image in my mind?
And I just terrifying.
It is. And the weirdest part about it is sometimes I would have the dream and it would just be a little bit scary and I would just kind of like get a little scared. But then for whatever reason, sometimes like the dream was more real and I like felt like I was in it more. I don't know. Like, I don't understand dreams, but there was just sometimes where I have the dream where I just like was present in it and I just felt like the overwhelming like fear of what it must actually feel like if you're about to be attacked, and like you have that brief moment of oh, I'm gonna die. This is it. And I don't know why it was different in those different times, but I'm telling you, man, there's got to be a thing I saw that put this image in my head, but I don't know what it is.
Maybe that's just part of the architecture of dreams, is like if you see something ominous that really shouldn't be there, maybe your brain is like, now make it attack him, this will be fun.
Now honestly, what's going to happen is, because I've just talked about it and now I'm thinking about it, I'm probably going to have that fucking dream again tonight.
Well, me too, Scott.
I haven't lived in that house in literally 30 years and I'm going to have the dream of that same house. That's going to be great. Thanks, brain. That's awesome.
And plus you've probably just much like, Bagul or something, you've like transmitted that dream creature to everyone who's listening right now. So yeah,
sorry folks. Folks.
Or it's the Ring, actually.
It just moved so fast, that shadowy thing. It just moved so fast. And it's like you go, like, I think it's part of it is the concept of like you wake up and you're scared and you go to your parents' room to be safe. And like it's in that point that you're attacked, it's like that
I feel like we've talked before about how when you're young, like 5 or younger, you're walking around the house in the dark and your eyes will make forms and figures out of just like the sort of shifting chaos of the darkness. And that's what that reminds me of anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I'll just I think we've been going on long enough, but I'll just round off some other things I was thinking about when I thought of this prompt. There was a 1985 version of Alice Through the Looking Glass that I think was a made for TV version, and Alice is just kind of chilling in her room and suddenly the Jabberwocky is there, and it scared the ever living shit out of me. And actually I looked it up when I was thinking of this prompt and watched it, and it looks fake and terrible, and yet to my young eyes, it was one of the scariest things I'd ever seen. So that's one of mine. my cousin and I snuck into the family room while my parents and uncle were watching it on the TV when it originally came out. So I would have been about 7 or 8. And so we watched that hidden behind the couch, and that was a bad idea. That scared the shit out of me. But that's not like here's a thing you should expose your children to. That was like they specifically told us not to watch it, and then we did anyway.
Yes, that is a scary movie.
We talked last week about the certain scenes in Ghostbusters that really freaked me out, and I think that stuff freaked me out in the fun kind of way, where like the spooky looking gross hands, pouring out of the chair, both terrified me and elated me in its weirdness.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything in Ghostbusters that I found like negative.
No.
It's just spooky and creepy.
Yeah. There's also a 1989 Fred Savage movie called Little Monsters. Do you remember that movie? Probably not.
No, I don't.
It's more of a comedy. It's not scary, but I don't know. There's scenes in it that are just like weird and uncomfortable in the exact kind of ways that made me just a little weird, a little. I didn't know how to make I didn't like it.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like there must be many other similar things that I'm just blanking on.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Any more you got?
Not really. No. Those are all the ones that I wanted to talk about going into this. I'll probably think of several more as soon as we hang up, or I'll probably have nightmares about it. I mean, I think Predator was one where like I definitely saw aliens at a young age. That didn't really scare me that much, but for some reason Predator did. I think maybe it's because the Predator is invisible, and the idea of an invisible monster that stalks you is pretty scary, actually. This is the thing. We would always go into the woods, like the deep woods. There's no aliens. There's no xenomorphs in the deep woods, but it's totally believable that the Predator would be standing on that tree right there, especially if you see the tree branch move slightly, and you're like, oh shit. Yeah. The tree branch move. What was that? Why did the tree branch? And you're just staring at it, and you're just imagining the heat vision eyes looking back at you. And then you hear the woodpecker sound, which is what the sound the Predator does, but it's actually a woodpecker. And you're like, oh fuck, oh Jesus. That's the Predator for sure.
That's great. I love that. So that's ours. I think the people listening at home probably noticed that most of ours take place in the 80s and early 90s because that's when we were children. So I'm actually curious, folks out there listening, what scared you as a kid? And if you're younger than us, it's probably stuff from the later 90s and the early 2000s and stuff. And I wonder what weird, creepy, uncomfortable things, or not weird and creepy, uncomfortable things, but just made you feel uncomfortable and weird were there. So let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or on Twitter @doofmedia, Instagram @doofmedia, and the Doof Media subreddit, where you'll find a post for this very episode, which would be the perfect place to let us know what freaked you out as kids. That's r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us anywhere podcasts are sold.
That is right. And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. And if you like what we do here at Doof Media and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media, perhaps while you're voting for whether or not Coraline deserves being in the canon. And you can at certain level, at the Council of Doof level, you can become a member of the council that gets to pick what movies we talk about each month. This movie, we're talking about it because one of our council members nominated it, and enough of our patrons agree to it, and so then we're talking about it. So you too can have that power. You can just head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and get it.
Excellent. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, because every review does help us get more exposure and introduce new people to the content that we make here.
Yeah, and one final note before we go for the week. I believe tonight being Friday the 19th, Elliot is going to be hosting a watch party over on the Doof Media Twitch account. That's twitch.tv/Doof Media, where he's going to be watching the first 3 episodes of the new Netflix show Arcane, which is apparently based on League of Legends. It's supposed to be like really good or something. And Elliot's going to be watching. I hope I didn't just, I'm pretty sure that's set in stone. I think he's doing it. It is now because I said it. So you can head over to twitch.tv/doofmedia. I do think you're going to have to download an extension. I think it's called Tanami, but I'm pretty sure Elliot will walk everyone through exactly how to do that on the live stream this Friday, today, the 19th at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. I might join in on that because we got a very long but very nice email from a listener basically telling us we need to go watch that show, Matt, that it's very, very good and we need to watch it. So I'm
hearing good things about it for sure.
Yeah, like, look, here's the deal, folks. Like, if you send us a long email telling us to watch something, we're probably like, that's a commitment. Like, we're probably going to check it out. So I hope I didn't just open the floodgates of people doing that, but it's just the truth. If I get a long email from a listener explaining exactly why I need to watch this great thing, I'm much more likely to try it out. So maybe I'll be there on Friday with Elliot to check out Arcane. But that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we will be back with another episode of our Deconstructing Cameron series. Matt, it's finally time to talk about Bill Paxton's True Lies.
Yep. Top tier.
We'll see you all next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.